Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I've lived in my beachfront home for over 20 years now. It's nothing too fancy, just a nice little one-story house right on the sand. I was lucky enough to buy it when prices were still reasonable in the area. Nowadays, these homes go for millions. Anyway, one of the best parts about living here is the private beach area that comes with the property. It's not very big, just a small strip right along my backyard, but it's so nice to have my own little piece of beach that no one else can use. I don't mind people walking by or playing in the public beach area nearby, but the little strip that's part of my property is for my personal use. I paid for this house and the land that comes with it, so I don't think that's an unreasonable request. Well, my new neighbor Karen clearly didn't see it that way. The day she moved in, I went over to introduce myself and give her a quick rundown of the area. I made sure to politely explain that the beach behind my home was private property. Karen gave me a weird look, like I'd just told her she wasn't allowed to use public bathrooms or something, but she didn't say anything about it, so I figured she understood. A few weeks later, I looked out my window and saw a small tent set up in the middle of my private beach area. There was also a little campfire going. I walked outside to investigate and found none other than Karen hanging around the tent with a few friends. They were casually roasting marshmallows like they were in their own backyard. "Hey there, what's going on?" I asked as politely as I could manage. "Oh, hi, isn't this great?" Karen said excitedly. "It's so nice to just hang out here by the water." I took a deep breath, trying hard to hold my tongue. "Yes, it's very nice, but as I mentioned before, this is actually my private beach area. I'll have to ask you to move your tent and fire pit off my property." Karen's smile dropped immediately. "Are you serious? The beach belongs to everyone. I should be allowed to camp here if I want." I could feel my patience wearing thin, but I stayed calm. "I'm afraid that's not how private property works. I own this land, and I kindly ask that you respect that." "Oh, you're being completely unreasonable," Karen huffed. "It's not hurting anyone for us to hang out here for one night. Don't be such a jerk about it." Now I was getting angry, but I managed to keep my cool and simply said, "I'm going to have to insist that you pack up your things and leave. This is private property." Karen folded her arms across her chest defiantly. "No, I'm not moving. We have just as much right to be here as you do." At this point, I'd had it. I told Karen firmly that if they didn't vacate the premises immediately, I would be forced to call the police. Karen's eyes went wide with shock. Then she got a smug look on her face and said, "You can't force us to leave without an eviction notice. I know my rights, but fine. Go ahead and call the cops if you want. We'll tell them how you're harassing us for no reason." I shook my head in disbelief and went back inside to call the police. I gave them a full report of what was happening. The dispatcher assured me they would send someone out promptly. About 15 minutes later, a police car pulled up. 2 officers got out, and I showed them where Karen and her friends were still camped out on my beach. The cops spoke to Karen first, presumably hearing her side of the story. Then they came to talk to me. I politely explained that they were trespassing on my private property and refused to leave when asked. The officers were very understanding. They went back over to Karen and her friends and firmly told them they needed to pack up their stuff and leave immediately. Karen argued and complained, but eventually the cops convinced her to take down the tent and put out the fire. She shot me a nasty glare as she hauled her stuff off my beach with her friends. I smiled and gave a little wave as the officers escorted them away. I thought that would be the end of it. But a few hours later, I got a call from the police department. Apparently after they left, Karen had gone down to the station to file harassment charges against me. She was claiming I had verbally assaulted her and her friends. I told the officer who called that Karen was outright lying. I remained calm and polite the entire interaction. I even offered to provide security camera footage proving that I never yelled at them or got aggressive. Thankfully, the police believed me. They told me they had already decided not to pursue charges after hearing Karen's exaggerated story. I was relieved I wouldn't have to go to court over her ridiculous accusations. It's been a few months now, and I haven't had any more issues with Karen trespassing. She still gives me angry glares whenever we cross paths in the neighborhood, but I don't really care what she thinks of me. I was completely in the right standing up for my property. If she wants to have beach bonfires and campouts, she can join a local campground like everyone else. Karen learned the hard way that trying to freeload off others won't get her very far in life. The next one is a pro-revenge story. So this was quite a few years ago. One day my kids were skating in a quarter pipe when a truck came around the corner with a guy driving and he saw my daughter come off the quarter pipe. Instead of slowing down, he floored it and ripped past my house, still accelerating while yelling something about keeping out of the road. I yelled, "Slow down!" The following weekend, I was out mowing my lawn and I saw this guy coming, so I walked out to the edge and tried to wave him down to talk. The guy floored it again, laughing like a maniac as he went flying by with his engine redlining. This guy is a nut. So I went to the hardware store and picked up 3 of those 3-foot orange safety cones, and I put a sign on each one of them: "Slow down, residential neighborhood, kids at play." A few days later, I came outside and found the cones had been run over. I already knew who had done it. I was pretty pissed off, like really angry, and in that anger I came up with my most brilliant plan. I went to the hardware store and purchased 3 new cones, along with cement and steel rebar. I filled those cones with rebar and cement and let them set. After the cones were ready, I put them back out on the side of the street by my house with the same 3 signs as before: "Slow down, residential neighborhood, kids at play." It didn't take long. 2 days later, I was in my garage tinkering and I heard that damn truck's engine revving up as the guy went pedal to the metal. I looked up just in time to see his truck steer towards the shoulder to run over the cones. Damn. It was a beautiful sight like none I've ever seen before. He hit the first cone with his bumper, and the cone fell forward and rotated the base up towards his engine block, actually lifting the front of his truck upwards. His front passenger wheel made a direct connection with the second cone and launched his truck up even higher in the air. The third cone also made a direct hit on his right tire suspension as his truck came down to a screeching halt. There were fluids running out from under his truck, and his passenger tire was angled inwards at a 90-degree angle. The guy was pissed off and started screaming about how I wrecked his truck and how I'm gonna pay. I yelled back and said, "Well then, let's call the cops and get them out here to make a report, and you can tell them how you were racing down the road and intentionally ran over the safety cones. Or I can call you a tow truck. Which will it be?" We called a tow truck. I never did see the guy drive down my street anymore after that incident. I was worried he'd try to get revenge, but nothing ever happened, and we moved out a couple of years later. The next one is a petty revenge story. A fellow nurse was a preceptor for a nursing student. She's been off the last 2 weeks, and I took over. I like to teach, and the students make it easier to get through the day as they aren't jaded yet. The clinical teacher at the university gives me the student's contact information. I ask for his lesson plan or teaching objectives, and she says the student has it and will send it to me. Great. So I contact the student I will call Brad. I ask for the information so I can plan out what he needs to see and do over the next 2 weeks so he can graduate. This is on a Friday and he is supposed to start on Monday. He sends me nothing. I ask that he be there 30 minutes before the shift so we can go over what that day's plan will be. He shows up 2 hours late, saying he slept in. Not off to a great start. Asked for his lesson plans, what skills he needed to work on, what type of patients he needed to see, etc. He said he didn't have one. The last nurse gave him an evaluation, and that was all he needed to pass clinical, so he was just going to shadow me for 2 weeks and graduate. I've precepted before and know this to be bull crap. I contacted his clinical teacher and his previous preceptor. She filled out her evaluation and was going to fail him, but because the term wasn't over, she left anything that wasn't completed blank, as he still had an opportunity to demonstrate knowledge, skill, and judgment in those areas over the next few weeks. The clinical teacher asked that I give the pass-fail evaluation and sent me all the paperwork. Brad, who's 22 and apparently knows everything, was informed daily, and I made a point of doing this daily, that I was willing to teach skills, answer questions, provide learning experiences with various procedures on whatever type of patient he needs, from children to geriatric, long-term illness to acute accidents. What you need, Brad? I got something behind curtain hash 3. Brad didn't want to learn or do anything, so he didn't. I had him for 10 days, and he was late 7 times and spent most of his time getting garbage out of the vending machines and hanging out in the lounge. Even if he was inclined, I wouldn't let him near patients until he demonstrated he knew what he was doing. I would ask him how he would insert a catheter, IV, art line, etc., and he had no idea. I would go over a patient's meds and ask what they were and what they did. What's the mechanism of action of this med? What do we need to know before administering it, etc.? No idea. But he was smug, said he knew all this stuff and is just biding his time until graduation. It's an easy job. Girls can do it. Okay, I could have and probably should have told him I was doing his evaluation, but it must have slipped my mind. I had been in contact with his clinical teacher about 3 times and letting her know exactly what is going on, and she said it was up to him to pass or fail. His last day was Friday, and today, Monday, I met his clinical teacher and went over my evaluation, pulling no punches. She wasn't surprised as he had problems before and was barely in the program, having failed once before. I am asked to wait a few minutes, and the clinical teacher leaves. A minute later, I see her walking with Brad past the office I am in and go into a larger boardroom. I see him, he doesn't see me. About 10 minutes later, the dean of nursing, who I knew back when I was a student, greets me, and after a few warm words, takes me into that boardroom. Well, it turns out that our boy Brad had gotten the evaluation from the previous preceptor and just filled in all the outstanding grades himself. No wonder this kid had no worries in the world. He turned a pale white you only see in linen when he saw me. I handed him a copy of my evaluation that I had previously sent to the clinical teacher, and his face went from white to ashen to red in just seconds. Well, Brad not only failed the course, but was expelled from the program for breaching academic integrity and fraud or something like that. It's a good thing he knows everything, because that will help him with whatever he plans to do next, because it won't be nursing. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Until recently, I used to work part-time for a delivery company that uses half pedal-powered, half battery-powered six-wheeled bikes that function like small semi-trucks, not Hermes. I intentionally avoided mentioning my actual company name. So after every shift, we have to park the bikes in the garage. Technically, there are designated spots in the garage for each individual bike. However, since people don't finish their shifts and return in the exact sequence required for parking the bikes, in practice, nobody actually parks the bikes in their correct spots. The first person back just parks at the back, even if their bike is supposed to be parked further up front. The next person to return parks in front of the first parked bike, and so on. The shift managers are aware of this and are okay with it. They work in the garage, so they understand the situation. However, a new employee named Karen from the corporate office, who recently joined a couple of days ago, did not know about this arrangement. She unexpectedly visited at the end of one day to check things out and noticed that my bike was parked at the very front. I had finished last that day due to an extended shift. Karen immediately called me and criticized me on the phone, conveying her displeasure quite directly. I called my shift manager right after and informed him about the situation. He said something like, "Well, technically she is right, so we can't directly oppose her. I suggest you simply ignore her. I doubt she will return to check." However, my competitive side did not want to let Karen have this victory over me. I decided to follow her instructions to the letter. I waited for a few more days until I had another long shift. I arrived early to claim the bike that was technically designated to be parked at the very back. You can probably predict where this is going. After completing my route, I purposely returned slowly to ensure I would be the last one back. Upon returning, I individually moved each and every bike in the garage. Then I parked my bike and took my time to ensure it was positioned perfectly in the center, both lengthwise and widthwise. This process took quite a while since the bikes function similarly to semi-trucks in terms of their movement mechanism. Consequently, it took me nearly 10 minutes to properly position one bike. I had 59 more bikes to go. I meticulously parked each and every bike in their designated spots until late into the night. My shift manager caught on to my plan fairly quickly and chose to turn a blind eye, as I was technically acting upon instructions from higher-ups. On that day, I logged 6 hours of overtime before clocking out, which led to a substantial increase in my pay. The following morning, the accounting department contacted me, questioning whether I had forgotten to clock out and returned later to do so, given that my clock-out time was approximately 6 hours later than everyone else's. I explained the situation to them in detail and suggested that they review the security camera footage inside the garage to verify that I had been working the entire time. Eventually, they relented and advised me not to repeat the action. Politely, I declined and asserted that I would carry out the same procedure the next day, as those were my given orders. They responded, "Our management team will reach out to you with updated instructions soon. Please adhere to those instructions." I agreed. Later that day, I received a message on Slack from Karen before starting my shift. She advised me to follow my shift manager's directions when parking my bike from now on. True to my word, I repeated the exact same process that day because my shift manager did indeed mention that the bikes were technically meant to be parked in their designated spots. I had the same conversation with the accounting department the following morning and received yet another Slack message from Karen, this time stating that I should park my bike in a manner that made practical sense. To this day, I am still relishing my triumph over corporate Karen. The next one is an entitled people story. I knew a lady who was going through a divorce. I was her tech person when she had a home business, and I was invited to her 40th birthday party. She wanted a new TV and a sound system hooked up. I needed my car because the TV would fit in it. We went together to pick up the TV, and while out, she went to do a little shopping for food, etc. During that moment, her ex saw us together. I am married and just helped this person. I hooked up her TV, the party happened, and I helped clean up at the end when her friends left. The ex heard from her friends that I stayed after the party ended. A few weeks later, she wanted a GPS setup for her car. It was a hot day, and her house air conditioner stopped working. I went there and knocked on the door. She didn't answer. I heard the car running in the garage. I went back to the door to look in the front window. The house was full of smoke. I opened the front door, which was not locked, and found her passed out on the couch. I picked her up and took her outside. She was breathing and coughing. I went back in, and she had the car running with the window down to make the car's air conditioner cool the house down by the internal access door to the garage, instead of filling up the house with carbon monoxide, which almost killed her. Yes, I have seen more stupid things, but not deadly. I turned off the car and opened up all the windows and doors. She was crying outside because she almost died, and if she did, people would think she deliberately killed herself. Instead, it was a mistake. If I had arrived a few minutes later, she would have been dead. I comforted her, and at that moment, the ex drove past on one of his stalking runs. Later, I saw him when he was picking up his kids from school. He called me a cheating prick, which was surprising because we got along before they broke up. He had already been spreading rumors to everyone that I was sleeping with her. He told his whole family, her family, and eventually got to my family. I didn't do anything wrong, and when I told them all what really happened, nobody believed me. Everyone believes him that something was happening before they broke up. Then he was making up extra reasons to say she was with me. Oddly, my wife is the person who laughed it off because she doesn't believe I would ever cheat on her, especially with that woman. The next one is an entitled parent story. I was not with him. My boyfriend is the vet in this. Keep in mind this is all secondhand through his experiences relayed to me. The incident occurred yesterday at the grocery store while my partner was shopping. This is actually a challenging task for him. He doesn't like all the aisles and people in stores, and he doesn't like that he feels distracted from paying attention to his surroundings by needing to concentrate on the list of items he needs. Because he's hard of hearing, he also can't easily hear where people are, and this is hard for him. Also, it's worth noting that he has extra trouble hearing high-pitched sounds like kids' and women's voices. During the COVID lockdown, he lost a lot of progress he had made with his anxiety, but he's working on getting back to where he was. He has a service dog now, which has helped him immensely, not just in public. He sleeps better now, and the dog will alert him when he is becoming anxious based on his behaviors and can calm him. It's really incredible. The dog has a vest. If you read it, you'd see he has a patch that says PTSD service dog, do not distract, and one that says hard of hearing handler. His dog is trained to guard him from people and alert him which side he's being approached from. This is not aggressive. The dog just uses its body to block him off and touches his legs while doing it so he knows someone is there. So he turns and saw this little kid looking up at him. He just told her the dog is working and she can't pet him, assuming that she had just asked him that. In response, the kid holds out her hand for the dog to sniff and she said, "Mommy says I can if I say hello first," or something along those lines. The dog doesn't react much at all, so the kid just starts hugging him. At this point, my partner stepped abruptly away from her and told her she needs to stop and to go find her parent. Now, he couldn't tell if the kid was old enough to read, but he's not really mad at the kid because a parent should be responsible for her in a store. And while I'm sure he was probably very stern with her since he's not very great with people, especially kids, even on a good day, he's also not someone who yells. Yet lo and behold, the child's grandmother, mother who knows, appears and is telling him not to yell at a little girl he made her cry and a bunch of other crap. He was only catching about 30% of what she was saying. He told her he has a service dog. She needs to keep the kid off. Read the vest. The lady rolled her eyes at him and continued berating him. He said he was just standing there, largely ignoring her, thinking if she says what she wants, then she'll go and leave him alone. But then this woman snaps her hand in my partner's face and asks him, "Are you a retard?" Thankfully, there was a couple shopping who must have overheard. The woman from this couple came and moved that woman out of my partner's face, and looked like she was chewing her out until the Karen left the aisle. The man from that couple asked my partner if he was all right. He turned out to be a veteran too, and they bonded a little over their tattoos. I'm honestly still livid about it, and I wasn't even there. He's moved on. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.